Hello, welcome to the Freckled Cottage. If you're new here, welcome, new friend. My name is Cherie, and I'm the owner and creator at the Freckled Cottage. I love to thrift, flip, and make discarded items wanted again. Sometimes I place them into my booth, and sometimes I keep them for my own decor. In this video, I'm going to show you how I took some cast-off items and transformed them using some products from the Iron Orchid Designs 2023 holiday release. And a little warning from the start. This video will be a study in what not to do and how to recover from crafting mistakes. These projects had so many twists and turns and didn't go at all like I had planned, especially the second one. I'm sharing because no DIY project ever turns out exactly the way you envision it, especially with subjects and products that you haven't used before, which is the norm for thrift flip type projects. So with that, learn from my mistakes so you don't have to make them yourself. So with all that said, for today's first project, I'm using the new IOD Holly Glen transfer, and I picked out these 5 frames that I have thrifted from various places. The first thing I did is mix up some paint. I combined some DIY Summer Crush with Marquee to end up with a nice rusty color that I liked. Then I took these 3 tiny ornate gold frames and I painted them with this rusty orange-red color mixture. The art inside is and will remain protected behind the plastic that's on top. It's not glass, it's just plastic, and I'm not going to be removing the art at all. It will remain protected even though I'm going to paint over the plastic that sits on top of it. I'm using the DIY Perfectionist brush to cut in on all of these little details and the fine line on the frame. This brush really is great for this because of the pointed tip. It really lets me cut into the details really easily. This round frame has a paintable surface, so I'm just going to go ahead and get the back of it painted. Having a heat gun nearby is super handy for saving time, and I'm just going to go ahead and use it real quick to dry those up. Then on the center plastic surfaces, I decided to have a white background, so I got out the DIY paint color White Swan. I got the center of the 2 square frames painted in that, and the color started to look a little off, so I decided that the glossy surface needed to be primed, and the best one I have for this is Dixie Belle's Slick Stick. So I applied that directly to the round frame that hadn't yet been painted on. In the end, this will save on multiple coats of paint. These are very small projects, but it does add up. For the 2 square frames that I had already painted with the White Swan, I decided to get out the Dixie Belle Boss primer to block some of the staining that was coming through. I do think that started to look a little off-colored and perhaps yellowed, and I didn't really like that, so I used the Boss primer to make sure that it would stay white when I used the White Swan on top of it. I did go ahead and use 2 coats of the Slick Stick on the round frame, and once that was complete, I put a coat of Big Top on the entirety of all 3 of the frames, including the centers. It will serve as a barrier between the absorbent clay-based paint and the next layers of decorative waxes that would be hard to move around and manipulate otherwise. Next, I got out the book of Holly Glen transfers and my handy-dandy measuring tape. I had the sizes in mind, but I just wanted to make sure that the transfers that I was thinking of were actually going to fit inside these frames, so I was just picking out which ones I was going to use. And so I picked out the 3 that I liked best, and then just used my scissors to cut in on those transfers so they would be easier to apply to the frames. So when I'm ready to apply the transfer, I just remove the backing from the transfer and carefully lay it down exactly where I want it. I grab the transfer stick that's included with every transfer purchase and just rub that down until it sticks to the background. To make burnishing easier, I cut out a little round piece of the backing as the entire large piece wouldn't fit inside the frame. So one thing I like to do when I'm applying transfers is when I've got the transfer stuck down exactly where I want it, I like to start working on one end and then peeling the backing away until I get to about the middle of the transfer. And then what I do is flip over the project and start working from the bottom towards the middle. I do this so that when the transfer is adhered, I can be confident that I have one hand on the transfer in case it decides to shift before it's been completely adhered. These are pretty easy because each transfer is generally one continuous design, but this technique works especially well to ensure a complete adhesion when the transfer is intricate and broken up into lots of small design elements. I think this trio is absolutely adorable. What do you think? For the rust-colored frames, what I did next was I went in with the Dixie Belle Best Staying Wax in the color black, and I gave a good coating on all three of the frames. I then used a soft cloth to wipe it all back off the high points so that the black wax would sit deep inside the details and bring out those intricate elements so that they could stand out. I also made sure to get some of that black wax into the corner so that it would look like dirt had collected and had a little grunge over time. What I did next was I got out the DIY wax and clear just to use it as an eraser on the center of those small frames so that the center of them didn't look too dingy. I did not record, but what I did next was take the two larger frames outside and give them 2 coats of Rust-Oleum black satin spray paint, and then I brought them back in to work on. For the background, I got out some thicker art paper and some folk art chalk paint in the color black, and put a coat of black paint on the background that I wanted these transfers to sit on. The paper did curl up as I was painting it, but I just left them to air dry and they flattened out pretty well on their own as they dried. For the Holly Glen transfers on the black frames, I chose this beautiful bird sitting on this holly branch and then also the cute owl for the other one. So you'll see here, as I was explaining before, how I work from the top and then I flip it over and then start working from the bottom while I keep my hand on the bottom part just to make sure that nothing shifts at all while I'm making sure that the entire transfer has been adhered. Off camera, I put the art inside the frames, put the black frames back together, and cleaned up the glass. Then I got out DIY's gilding wax called Golden Rule to bring out the details in these beautiful frames. For me personally, I feel that using my middle fingertip works best, so I just dip my fingertip into the golden rule and lightly run it across the high points on the details of the frame. This wax is really easy to use, however, it's also pretty easy to overdo, so try to have a restrained hand because it's easy to add more if you need, but it is a little difficult to remove if you've done too much. And then I did the same for the rust-colored frames. I am really liking how these have turned out. They really speak to the moody tone of the autumn season, and the Holly Glen animals are just so adorable. Project number 2, I have this ceramic mold that I found at a thrift store. The detail on it is amazing and just screaming for some help to bring it out. On the back it says Yosi mold and appears to be from 1978. So I decided to start this project by using some Sweet Pickins milk paint, and I wanted to create a custom color, which seems to be what I like to do a lot of the time. So I used Sweet Pickins, Moody Blue, and Flour Sack to start out. The flour sack I had seemed to be just enough as a 1-to-1 ratio with 1 tablespoon of the Moody Blue. When I mixed those powders up, it didn't quite look like what I was after, so I looked through my supplies and I decided to get out the Sweet Pickins color proper, and I mixed in an equal part of that as well. That looked a lot more like what I was after, so that was 1 part Moody Blue, 1 part flour sack, and 1 part proper. I mixed in the equal parts water, which was 3 tablespoons. I was surprised and delighted to notice that this color is pretty much an exact match for DIY's Skeleton Key. Due to the shadows, you may not be able to see it here, but I assure you it is spot on. So if you're after a milk paint shade that would match the color Skeleton Key by DIY, try using this recipe. I think you would really like it. And so with all that being said, I will say that I wish I had not even bothered with the milk paint on this project at all. The reason why I chose the milk paint was I thought I would get a little bit of a chippy texture. I wasn't totally certain because of the ceramic nature of the piece, but it seemed like it had a nice smooth coating on it that would help create some of the chippiness on it, but in reality all it did was soak right into the ceramic and there was no chipping at all, not even when I tried some wet distressing. So kind of no point in using the milk paint. Another reason I feel like the milk paint was a waste is that my next planned step was to use an inlay, and I didn't save any of this milk paint mixture to use for that step. In fact, I started on the inlay on a completely different day. Not only that, but I wasn't entirely sure about putting an inlay on top of milk paint anyways. I really didn't think this one all the way through. Good thing that Skeleton Key is a spot-on match. So the next thing I did was I got out the IOD Paint Inlay Rose Chintz. I selected and cut out some pieces from the rose chintz, and I'll apologize in advance because it kind of looks like this cutout is giving you the bird. When applying an inlay, apply a healthy but not too thick layer of paint to the project where the inlay is going to go. And as you can see here, the Skeleton Key pretty much matches exactly the background milk paint color, so I thought that was pretty cool. So I put a nice even layer of the DIY paint on the project where the inlay was going to sit, and then I just carefully lay the rose chintz where I want it to be and use my fingertips to gently press the inlay into the wet paint. Now this project is an extremely uneven, bumpy surface, so I fully expect an imperfect and distressed look, even more so than this inlay normally gives, but I did the best I could to get all those pretty flowers laid in. Once you have good contact between the inlay and the paint, it needs a light mist of water. Then I use a wet wipe to dab up any excess moisture and redistribute to any spots that might not have enough, to ensure the entire surface is evenly moistened. And then, here comes my next mistake. I picked out another piece of the inlay to lay into that bottom left-hand corner, and I laid it in upside down. The painted side needs to be facing down, not up. Haven't noticed it yet, but I've got another little piece here for the lower right-hand corner. I go to lay it in, and this one I notice right away before it's all the way down, that it's upside down. So I immediately decide to pull it up, retouch the paint layer, wipe the paint from the back of the inlay, and lay it back down the right way. By now I have noticed that the bottom left-hand corner piece is upside down, but at this point there isn't anything I can do about it as it's already started to dry. If I were to rip it up now, I fear that the entire paint layer underneath would be compromised, so I decided to just leave it and pull it up after it dries. And here now, once it's dry, you can see that that one corner is wrong side down. So what I did here was just mist the entire project, then use the wet wipe to lightly dab off the excess moisture. After waiting the full 60 seconds, I began carefully peeling off the inlay. And for the most part, this inlay did turn out pretty nicely. When I peeled it back, it had pretty good adhesion, and it came out pretty well considering the extremely uneven surface. And then for that bottom left-hand corner, as you can see here, I peeled that off and nothing was inlaid because it was wrong side down. So next I decided to see what would happen if I went ahead and redid that piece of inlay. It looks like I didn't film it, but I did re-inlay that corner with the right side up, and this is me peeling that inlay off, and it worked just fine. So this goes to show that these IOD inlays are really quite forgiving if you mess them up like this. If you put them on wrong side down, they can still be reused. You can still inlay them, and especially this rose chintz pattern. It really lends well to practicing and becoming familiar with the inlays because they're really forgiving and super easy to use. Next, I took the project outside so that I could create a light top coat. I find that Rust-Oleum Clear Matte Spray works really well for this step. And the reason you want to do this is that these inlays are essentially just chalk paint, and if you were to go in with a stiff wax brush or overwork a layer of liquid top coat with a brush, it would be very easy to smear the paint. So once you have this light top coat layer and it is dried, you are free to use a brush to apply waxes or top coats and it won't smear the paint. As you can see in the background on the brown paper that I've already worked out a scene. I also decided on the color of ink that I'm going to use, which was VersaFine Clear ink in the color Morning Mist, which is a medium gray tone. These VersaFine inks are really good for when your stamp has a lot of detail, and that's why I chose it for this project. The color I chose because I didn't want the contrast to be too dark against the background. I'm using a piece of thin mount to apply the stamps and just lightly using my fingertips to press down on all the parts of the stamp gently and evenly. Right off the bat, the image looks a little lighter than I'd like, but I'm in knee-deep now, so I pressed on with the lamppost, flower box, and window, using the masks provided with the stamp set. Objects in front get stamped first, then mask, then the item behind it. In between stamps, I used my heat gun to heat set the ink to prevent smearing. Overall, the stamping turned out well, but I wasn't happy with the color as I felt it kind of disappeared and didn't stand out much. Should I have left it like this? Keep watching and then let me know your thoughts in the comments. Well, whatever it is I should have done is in the past, because what I did was decide that I didn't like it and perhaps it needed some oomph, some decoupage. I got out some white tissue paper and stamped out a duplicate scene on it, this time choosing VersaFine ink in the much darker color Onyx Black. retrospect, that means yet another something I wish I had done differently. I wish I had wet torn this oval instead of using a scissor. A jagged line would have looked so much better. I used a DIY's clear liquid patina as my decoupage medium and began with a starter strip, working down the project slowly and carefully until it was all glued down, working out any wrinkles as I went. Then I gave the entire piece a full coat so the sheen would match across the entire project. Partly in an attempt to disguise the decoupage line, I decided to white wax the entire piece. So I came in with DIY's white wax to do that, and I feel like this worked out pretty well to bring the background to the same tone as the paper. It also really brings the details forward in such a pretty way. I grabbed the clear wax in an attempt to blend the line between no wax in the center and white wax in the frame, but I decided to bring the white wax all the way across the piece and then buff back to highlight the main scene. This was such a roller coaster, you guys, but even though I was discouraged at several points, I'm so glad that I persevered because it came out so nicely. The florals complement the scene and the ornate design of the frame so well. I'm just in love with it. This would look so pretty in a feminine powder room or office or even a little girl's room. The last step in this project was to add a little zing to the details, so I got out the DIY gilding wax called the Golden Rule again. I just love this stuff. It's so easy to use and makes the details just pop so perfectly. Now, while editing this video, I had another idea, albeit too late. What if I had inlaid with white swan or crinoline over the entire piece, and then wet distressed back to the dusky blue milk paint color? Perhaps the first attempt with Morning Mist would have turned out better over the lighter color. Alas, we will never know, but it's fun to dream and to learn what to do better next time. All of these items will be available for sale in my booth at the Rustic Rooster Market in Princeton, Minnesota. If you are not local, feel free to email me or DM me on Instagram for pricing and an invoice, and I will ship it right to you. I'm currently working on getting my Instagram and Facebook shops set up. A website is also in the works, which is so exciting. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked today's video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up. And if you have like-minded friends, be sure to share it out. Check out previous content and also subscribe and comment to support my new channel. Oh, and turn notifications on to ensure you're notified every time a new video is uploaded. Find time to create and see you next time.